The New York Mets won their season series against the Dodgers on Thursday. Really was a great win. Now, the toughest part of their schedule is behind them, leading an open road for them to win the National League East. On the show today, I'll talk about that series we just watched. We will do a little bit of a Friday farm report. I'm going to talk about Francisco Alvarez's ankle injury and the fact that Mark Vientos will not be a September call-up. And then we'll close the show today looking at the road ahead. As I already mentioned, the NL East is the Mets division for the taking.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, this was one of the last hurdles for the New York Mets when it comes to winning the National League East. After this, you got a series against the Brewers, you got a series against the Braves, and everything else is sub 500 teams. That does not guarantee the Mets are going to win this division. But we all saw this series and thought to ourselves as they walked into it with, a 3-game lead in the division. Now, here the Braves were playing the Rockies, the Mets are playing the Dodgers, and this was a real chance to slip up and cough up the division lead. Well, guess what? The Mets did not do that. They lost a game that they probably could have won. To open up that series. And they found a way to win the series outright after that. And right now they're 3.5 games up on the Braves. The Braves are playing the Rockies as I speak right now. And if they win, you're still talking a 3-game lead, and the schedule now lightens up for the Mets. We're going to talk about the division a little bit more in the final segment, but to see the Mets once again find a way to do it playing in front of their home crowd, it's really impressive. They're 45-21 at Citi Field this year, and that home field advantage continues to grow. When you see Brandon Nimmo yesterday making that catch, the way the crowd responded, the way the crowd showed up for an afternoon game today, it's a fun team to watch. And, this was a game against the Dodgers where you had to go up against Clayton Kershaw, which is not an easy draw. And I think this was one of those circumstances where you're facing a great pitcher, where in the beginning of the game, you were thinking, man, they missed an opportunity, because in the first inning, he's coming off the IL. He's trying to shake the rust. He walks Starling Marte. Lindor gets a base hit. That was probably a little bit of a fortunate one based on the way the Dodgers were positioned. Kind of a slow ground ball gets through to the outfield. And then Pete Alonso draws a walk, and you're sitting there, 1 out, bases juiced against Kershaw. And this is the time to, capitalize. Darren Ruff, who's supposed to be mashing against lefties, he did get a sac fly today, so give him his credit on that. But here's his chance to get a big hit. He pops out. Mark Canha luckily drew a walk that put the Mets on the board. But then Jeff McNeil pops out as well, and you're thinking, man, what a missed opportunity, especially when in the next half inning, top of the second, the Dodgers take the lead right back. Justin Turner doubles. Gavin Lux gets a base hit, put 2 runners in scoring position. They then had a bases loaded chance as Trace Thompson drew a walk, and Chris Taylor got the big knock for them that put 2 runs on the board. But Chris Bassett did a good job limiting damage. That was really the only inning where he ran into a ton of trouble. In the 6th, he did walk a pair. But overall, Chris Bassett was able to stop the bleeding after that inning. 6 innings pitched, 6 hits allowed, 2 earned runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. Season ERA for Chris Bassett now at 3.32. And he picks up a win in this one to go to 12-7 on the year. The Mets, though, were sitting there losing, throughout the rest of his start there. Clayton Kershaw was great after that first inning. He retired the next 12 batters he faced before exiting after the 5th. And that's where the game finally picked up for the Mets. In the 6th inning with Kershaw out, they were able to get back on the board. Starling Marte got a base hit. It was an infield hit. Really did a great job beating that out. It's funny how, Marte really picks and chooses his spots to run hard. I know there's traditional baseball fans that would like them to run every single play out, but Marte seems to have a really good gauge of when he has a chance to beat something out and when he doesn't. And he certainly smelled a hit in that spot. Big, inning there in the sixth to try to get on the board, just getting into the bullpen. Leads off the inning with that hit. Francisco Lindor starting to heat up again. He doubled home Marte, sitting there with a tie ball game. Lindor sees an opportunity. He steals third. Pete Alonso struck out. Lindor steals third, puts a runner right there for Darren Ruff to try to drive him in with a sac fly, and he did just that. Interesting that he did it against a righty. The lefty masher has not mashed lefties, but he did come through in that spot there. We'll talk a little bit in the next segment about Mark Vientos and the idea that could he be a better lefty masher than Ruff, and why won't the Mets give him an opportunity? At least this was an instance where we saw Darren Ruff come through. And then you get to the seventh inning, the Mets dip into their bullpen, and it's Trevor May holding a one-run lead. This is something that I think is starting to develop where maybe we're seeing the bullpen come together. And it starts with Edwin Diaz. We know that. Adam Ottavino has been great. We'll talk about him as he got a save today. But it's Seth Lugo and Trevor May to me. These are some of the X factors. Tyler McGill on a rehab assignment now, or is at least beginning one, I think either tonight or tomorrow. And we'll see how McGill pitches, how quickly he can come back. But Trevor May and Seth Lugo are guys that have done it before at the biggest level, under the bright lights. So if they can get these two guys going, and they really have with Lugo and Trevor May, this was a good performance by him. He walks the leadoff batter, but he struck out too, and he struck out Mookie Betts. So that was impressive. He fell behind 3-0 on Mookie and struck him out. That's not easy to do. He reared back. He threw his best fastball 3-0 to get a strike on Betts. Threw a changeup that got called for a strike, and then threw one that Betts just swung through and was able to get that big out. Then he got Trey Turner out. So going through that really tough part of the Dodgers order. And then with Freddie Freeman due up, Buck Showalter ended up going to Diaz in the eighth. Before that, though, the Mets got a couple more insurance runs. And actually, I thought they might stay away from Edwin after that, maybe hold him for the ninth. But in the bottom of that seventh inning, big thank you to Gavin Lux. You have James McCann with 2 outs doubles, so good to see him contribute. Then Brandon Nimmo doubles. And we say that with quote marks because it was a pop out that Gavin Lux did not go out and get. Mookie Betts couldn't come in on it. The ball drops with 2 outs. McCann was running all the way, so he scores easily. Nimmo is always hustling. He gets to second base. Then Starling Marte drives in Nimmo with a knock. There you go. Mets up 5-2. Eighth inning comes around, and Edwin Diaz was not his usual perfect dominant stealth. He struggled a little bit. He walks Freddie Freeman. That's the reason he came into the game in the eighth. And then he got ahead on Will Smith 0-2, ends up hitting him with a pitch that put 2 runners on. And it got a little dicey. Max Muncy flew out. Then Justin Turner flew out for a sac fly. So you're sitting there 2 outs. You still got a runner on base. You're hoping that Edwin can get through it. He faces Gavin Lux, gets ahead 0-2, just firing fastballs by him, right? First one, 99.4. Second one, 99.9. Third one, 99.8. You look at the pitch tracks, that pitch could not have been any more close on the black there. I thought it was a strike. They ruled a ball. So what does Edwin Diaz do? He rears back and fires at 103 miles per hour to strike out Gavin Lux. And really, that ended up being the ball game for the Mets. They don't do much in that following inning, but it doesn't matter. Adam Ottavino comes on and notches his 3rd save of the season. ERA at 2.01. He struck out 2 in that last inning and got Mookie Betts out again. You look at this season for Adam Ottavino over his last 19 appearances, 21 innings pitched, 16 hits allowed, 2 runs, both earned, 4 walks, 28 strikeouts, a 0.86 ERA, and all those stats courtesy of Matthew Brownstein on Twitter. But what this Mets team just did to win the season series against the Dodgers, there's been 3 teams all year that have won a season series against LA. The Phillies, surprisingly, also won 4 of 7. You have the Mets, and then you have the Pirates of all teams who have actually dominated. I believe it was 4-1 on the season series so far with Pirates, Dodgers. That's kind of nuts. But here you are. The New York Mets have now gotten through that last major hurdle. And looking ahead, schedule lightens up enough that you're feeling pretty confident in their ability to hold on to this division lead, particularly with the Washington Nationals coming up. Let's actually go there next, and we'll close out the show with a Friday Farm Report. Before we get to that, though, are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst thing that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction time slows way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. All right, so we'll close the show today with our Friday Farm Report. But the Mets now have a nice series at home to try to continue to increase their division lead on the Atlanta Braves. And they're facing a team in the Nationals that they should have no problem beating up. Right now, the Nationals are playing for ping pong balls. I know that's a weird statement for baseball because we haven't always had ping pong balls, but now we do. There is a lottery, and they have the worst record in baseball. So they're trying to lose. You might see CJ Abrams out there as part of their future, and Josiah Gray is going to start game one. But those few building blocks are certainly not enough for them to win baseball games at this point. You got to make sure you capitalize against a team this bad. And I fully expect the Mets to, especially during a weekend series at home. And you kind of looking at the pitching matchups, and the Mets can go any way they want to against the Nationals. Josiah Gray is going to start game one. They'll have a freshly rested David Peterson if they want. They'll have Max Scherzer available if they want. Carlos Carrasco is potentially going to pitch this weekend. So those could be your three starters. You also could theoretically have Taijuan Walker start on Sunday as well. So they got their options. They can go any which way with it, and you'll feel confident in the pitching matchups because it's Josiah Gray with his 4.67 ERA. It's Patrick Corbin with his 6.56 ERA. And I'm just going to assume, without even looking up, his MLB leading 17 losses. I have no idea if that's the league leader in losses, but who could be worse than that? Eric Fetty, 5.29 ERA. He's 5-9. I mean, look, I don't want to do too much analysis on this series. If you're the Mets, you got to sweep a team like this. You just do. And after that, the schedule continues to remain light for the Mets. They'll have 3 against Pittsburgh before a series in Miami that has me concerned. I don't know why I'm worried about a Marlins team that isn't that good, but they do have the pitching that can beat you at any point. So that's the one series of what the Mets have ahead that actually has me a little bit nervous. But I mean, look at how this schedule just lightened up after the Dodgers. As I just mentioned, you got Nationals, you got Pirates, you got Marlins. That's your next week and change. The following week, you got the Cubs come into town. That's at home. Then the Pirates come into town for 4 at home. So you got 7 games against those bad Central teams in Citi Field. Then you got a road trip that's a little bit difficult. You're going to go to Milwaukee. You'll play 3 there. They're a good team that's trying to push for the playoffs. At least they haven't been a good team lately, but they were a good team at one point with some good pitching. Then you got Oakland. That's a West Coast series. Those are never easy, but that's a bad team. Then you go back home for 2 against the Marlins before you get to that series against the Braves in Atlanta, where the Mets could theoretically clinch the division. I look at the road ahead here, considering who they're playing. I just think that you might get to the point where the Braves are going to keep this close, but you might be, let's just say you're 4 games up heading into that last series, which would be picking up maybe a game, or if the Braves lose today, that could be where you're sitting and you're just holding steady with them. That really could be the opportunity for this Mets team to win the division. And if you look at the Braves schedule, it's so much more difficult that, I mean, who knows? Who knows what could happen over the final month of the season here, because they're playing the Rockies now. That game is scoreless through 2. They got the Marlins at home. Then they have a tough West Coast trip. I mean, not super difficult, but they're playing the Athletics, they're playing the Mariners, they're playing the Giants, all on the West Coast. Those swings are never easy. Then they got the Phillies. So then they play 7 out of 10 against the Phillies. The Phillies are going to be trying to win games. Obviously, they had some games against the Nationals mixed in between there. 3 of those out of that 10-game stretch against Washington. Then they played 2 or 3 more against Washington after that. So really, I guess, what is that? That's a 13-game stretch where it's 7 against the Phillies, 6 against the Nats. Then they play the Mets, then they'll close the season against the Phillies, and the Mets close their season against the Nationals. So I look at where they are after this series. I feel really good about the Mets' chances. I always have, but particularly getting through that tough set against the Dodgers and winning that series, man, you feel confident about the Mets' chances to close out this division. They just got to go out and beat some bad baseball teams, and the Mets have been able to do that all year long. And their pitching staff is just getting healthier and healthier. When Carrasco comes back into the mix, I wonder, do they try to see what they have in David Peterson as a left-handed reliever? Is Tyler McGill going to factor into this equation? Drew Smith could come back soon, and we've seen the steady progression that I talked about already of Seth Lugo and Adam Ottavino. That's the one big concern with the Mets right now is their bullpen, and I think that they have a solid month here to try to figure that out with their internal options. And again, the more we look at the internal options, the more I like them to a certain extent. But today is Friday, and we always talk about the Mets farm system on Friday. A Friday farm report coming up after a quick word from our sponsors. Friday farm report. We could dive into numbers, but there's two big storylines that I want to talk about today. And we always talk about really the top tier prospects in the Mets farm system because they're the guys that we're keeping the closest eye on to maybe contribute to this Mets team. We saw Brett Beatty. He's now likely out for the rest of the year. There's two more guys that we wondered if we would see them in the big leagues this season, and we got the September call-ups. We're not seeing either of them. Now, Francisco Alvarez is dealing with an injury. There was some loose bodies, as they said, in his ankle. That always is the weirdest phrase to me, loose bodies, bone chips. The human body is a marvel, and injuries are certainly just interesting, to say the least. I have no idea what a loose body is, and they're I guess, removing them, and they're resting, and I don't know. There's no surgery, actually. They're just, I know they ejected him with something. So he got an injection. They say 3 to 4 days he could be back playing, close out the season strong. But the reality is, you're not going to see Alvarez this year because he's not on the 40. So I don't know why they would promote him if there's no chance of him playing on a playoff roster. So no Alvarez this season, no Beatty anymore. That leaves us with Mark Vientos. And Vientos could have been a September call-up today. Instead, they went Devin Marrero, which if you listened to the show yesterday, I said they were probably going to grab an infielder. They did that Marrero. That gives him a backup shortstop with some flexibility. No surprise there. He'll be on the roster until you get Guillorme back, and then Guillorme slides back into his usual role. But it does beg the question, what happens with Vientos? Dom Smith, we're going to see him again. Probably not at this point. And with Daniel Polka not on the 40, he can't be on a playoff roster. So I don't know if you see him. Terrence Gore was called up, the day before. So he could be on a playoff roster. That was the significance there. And we saw him steal a base already. So that's the value he brings. But Mark Vientos is still the puzzling question because you got the Aaron Ruff struggling. At what point do you want to try it? That's my question. I mean, I've already gone through the numbers every single week. Listen to the last 15 Friday Farm Reports. I'm talking about Mark Vientos, and over half of them, I've wanted to see him promoted dating back to June. I don't get it, but it's clear the Mets don't see him as a contributing member to the team this season, which is fine, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see someone be so successful in AAA and not get his shot, particularly because if the Mets didn't like him, why didn't they use Mark Vientos with this great season he's having to improve that bullpen? It would have made a lot of sense if you don't think Mark Vientos is going to be part of your future to trade him and to get a reliever that could help you this year that's better than Michael Givens. With that said, I still think Vientos could be the DH next year, and he's going to finish out his season strong, and we'll see. And maybe we still see him this year. The one thing that we can say is that he's on the 40, so you could see Mark Vientos contribute this year. If you're watching on YouTube, something just went into my eye. I'm not crying over Mark Vientos not getting promoted, although it would be very fitting for me to shed a tear or two over Vientos. Maybe my body's telling me something that my brain is not. Mark Vientos could be on the playoff roster. If Darren Ruff continues to struggle, there is a chance that they could go to that. But based on where they are at the roster, it seems like they're leaning veterans. and they're just going to count that Darren Ruff is going to turn this around. Considering the fact that this is the front office that traded for him, I imagine they're going to stick with that experiment and hope that it resolves himself and he could be a contributing member for this team come October. Anyway, that's going to be all for the show today, for the show this week. As always, thank you for listening. We will be back on Monday to break down this series against the Washington Nationals. As always, make sure you follow, rate, and review. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. And actually, I'm about to record with Sully after this. So if you want more of me, check out Locked On MLB. You can find it wherever you get podcasts.